Why waste two lives when we can waste yours? Dad said. My parents asked me to confess to a hit and run for my sister. When I refused, they disowned me. Imagine standing in a police station, your world collapsing, only to have your own parents look you in the eyes and beg you to give up everything, including your freedom, future, and very identity for the sake of your sister's crime. That night I realized that some families choose appearance over honesty, and some lives appear to be worth less than others. Main narrative. The air in the precinct was thick with the stale aroma of burned coffee and despair. My hands trembled in my lap as I sat across from Detective Daniel Mercer, painfully aware of my parents' quiet, unbreakable wall shielding Scarlett, my younger sister. Her mascara had run black rivers down her flawless cheeks, making her appear even more gorgeous in her feigned grief. My mother's fingers constantly caressed Scarlett's hair, muttering calming things that I had never heard aimed at me. Someone needs to accept responsibility for this. Detective Daniel Mercer's words broke through the tension, and his eyes shifted between us. The evidence suggests that one of you was behind the wheel during the hit and run. Mrs. Evelyn Parker is currently in serious condition. My father then took a step forward, wearing a mask I recognized all too well, the one he wore while making cold, calculating business choices, assessing costs and benefits with harsh precision. "Officer," he started, "my daughters are here to fully cooperate. We simply need a moment to discuss this as a family." They escorted me into a small, antiseptic side room. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, giving everything a sickening yellow tint. Scarlett collapsed onto a chair, burying her face in her hands, her tears reverberating against the austere walls. My mother hurried to her, cuddling her as if she were still 6 years old rather than 24. Then my father turned to me, his look imprinted on my mind, something I can still see when I close my eyes. "Claire Bennett," he replied, his voice bland and devoid of emotion. "We need you to let them know you were driving." The words struck me like a physical blow, removing the breath from my lungs. "What?" "No. Scarlett was driving. I wasn't even inside the car." My speech was a frantic and choked murmur. Without looking at me, my mother spoke out. "Your sister has a whole life ahead of her. She has recently been admitted to graduate school. James wants to marry her. She is going to do something meaningful with her life. In contrast to you," the insinuation lingered in the air like toxic gas. I'd heard it 1,000 times in my life, in every subtle gesture and disdainful look. "This is ridiculous. I was not there. The truth will come out." I pleaded, turned to Scarlett, hoping she'd speak out and tell them this was ridiculous. She merely sobbed more, her expression disguised. My father's voice lowered, taking on the frightening tone he used when completing difficult negotiations, knowing he had the upper hand. "You are 29 years old, Claire Bennett. You work in a supermarket shop. You reside in a studio apartment. You've never done something noteworthy with your opportunities." "Scarlett would not survive jail," Mom said, finally catching my gaze. Her eyes were chilly, assessing. "Look at her. She's delicate. She's sensitive. But you're stronger. You've always been the tough one." "What are you referring to?" The words flowed out before I could stop them, expressing the hidden reality that had defined every family relationship for as long as I could remember. My mother blushed, but she did not deny it. "You're being theatrical. This is about practicality. Scarlett has opportunities that you will never have. Why squander two futures when we can only waste one?" Something inside me solidified at that instant. Hard, cold, and completely clear. When I looked at the lady who gave birth to me, I saw a stranger. Someone who had calculated my worth and determined that I was worthless. "Dear responsibility," as the older sister, Dad instructed, his tone condescending. "For once in your life, contribute to this family." I walked out of the room without uttering another word. My legs felt like lead, yet my back was ramrod straight. I gave Detective Daniel Mercer the complete truth about everything. Scarlett contacted me that night, distraught, and begged me to come to the police station for help. She'd been driving intoxicated when she hit Mrs. Evelyn Parker in a crossing, and became terrified. Our parents had arrived before me, already devising a horrible plot. The sight on my mother's face as I made my remark drove me through all that followed. My hands shook as I answered the detective's inquiries, but my voice remained firm. He was patient and systematic, meticulously recording every detail. My parents' features were distorted with wrath when I looked through the glass in the interview room. Dad paced like a caged beast. Mom wrapped her arm over Scarlett, who had slumped again, no longer sobbing but glaring at me with absolute loathing. "Let me make sure I understand," Detective Daniel Mercer remarked, going over his notes. "Your sister called you around 11:53 p.m. and asked you to meet her at the station. She didn't explain why over the phone." "No," I said, throwing my arms over myself, feeling cold despite the tight atmosphere. "She kept repeating she needed me, that something bad had happened. I suspected she'd been attacked or robbed. She sounded afraid. When you arrived, your parents were already there, and they took Scarlett to a private room first." "Yes," I affirmed, and the recollection made my stomach churn. When I stepped in, Dad quickly began detailing their strategy. They had already made all their decisions. They only needed me to agree. Detective Daniel Mercer put down his notepad and studied me with a look I couldn't decipher. "Miss Claire Bennett, what you are doing requires bravery. The most difficult instances are generally family-related. They're no longer my family." I heard myself say it, and the words seemed more genuine than anything I'd ever said as they left my mouth. The investigator excused himself to consult with his colleagues. I remained alone in that room for about 50 minutes, watching the clock tick by as my old existence faded away, second after torturous second. Through the glass I watched my parents gesticulating fiercely, Dad's face flushed with rage. A uniformed cop stepped between them and the interview room door, evidently to keep them from breaking in. When Detective Daniel Mercer returned, he was joined by another officer, a woman with gentle eyes who introduced herself as Sergeant Rebecca Hayes. She sat across from me with a lovely grin. "We're going to need you to give a formal statement," she stated. "Everything you remember from the phone call, the timeline, what your parents said to you. Can you do that?" I blushed. My throat felt constricted, but my determination was hardening into something stronger than diamond. They had made their decision on who I am. Now I was creating mine. The formal announcement took an additional 2 hours and 15 minutes. They prompted me to repeat some things numerous times, looking for contradictions. I knew what they were doing, which confirmed that I was telling the truth and that this was not a malicious fiction motivated by sibling rivalry. "Has there been any recent tension between you and your sister?" Sergeant Rebecca Hayes inquired. I agreed that there has always been tension, but not necessarily fighting. Rather, it was as if she existed in the light and I resided in her shade. That was exactly how our family operated. "Could you elaborate?" I took a big breath, attempting to articulate dynamics that had always been. Scarlett was the one who was attractive, intelligent, and had potential. I was just there. My parents made this plain in 1,000 tiny ways. Better clothing for her, fancier birthday celebrations, and more focus on her concerns. I learnt to become invisible. That must have been painful. It was natural, I explained, letting out a sour laugh. At least I assumed it was. Perhaps every family has a scapegoat and a favored child. I just happened to be born in the incorrect role. Sergeant Rebecca Hayes and Detective Daniel Mercer shared an unintelligible gaze. She took a few more notes before continuing. "Is this the first time they've asked you to make a sacrifice for your sister?" The query led to an unexpected outcome. Despite their age, memories came flooding back, vivid and stinging. "I was 16 when I started my first job," I explained slowly as I bagged groceries at the downtown grocery. "I saved every penny for over a year in order to attend the school trip to Washington, D.C., which cost $950. "Have you gone?" Scarlett's automobile broke down 10 days before her vacation. She was 18 years old and had recently received her driver's license. Dad explained that the family couldn't afford both the repair and my vacation. He used my funds to fix her automobile. The previous hurt felt remote, like if it had occurred to someone else. Scarlett traveled to prom in the automobile. I looked at the school trip images on Facebook. "Have your parents paid you back?" They claimed I was selfish for asking, and that family requires sacrifice. I informed them about our college fund, which existed until Scarlett decided she wanted to attend an expensive private institution. My funds had been sucked into hers. I'd been informed that community college was totally suitable for someone with my grades. I told them about how I won a regional painting competition in high school, which was the only thing I'd ever been truly excellent at. My parents had missed the award ceremony since it clashed with Scarlett's volleyball match. Mom hadn't even glanced up from cooking supper when I returned home with my award and $75 reward. "That's wonderful, sweetheart," she'd replied absently. "Can you set the table?" "We're eating early because Scarlett has practice." The ribbon had disappeared into a drawer. Scarlett's volleyball trophies adorn the mantel. Why didn't you leave? Sergeant Rebecca Hayes inquired. Once you were 19, you could have walked away. Where would I go? Even I thought the question sounded naive. I had no money, no vehicle, and no support system. And a part of me kept believing that if I simply pushed more, performed better, or proved myself in some way, they'd eventually notice me. And tonight, I met her gaze straight. Tonight I finally understand. They will never see me. Not in the manner I needed them to. They regarded me as expendable. So I'm getting rid of them instead. The subscribe line is halfway through. By the way, if you're still with me after that, please click the subscribe button. Trust me, I have more stories that will make your mouth drop, and I do not want you to miss out. After I concluded my statement, they told me to wait while they interrogated my sister. I sat in a different room, nursing horrible coffee from a vending machine and watching the minutes tick away on the wall clock. It was after 3:18 in the morning. A victim advocate whose name I don't recall came to check on me. She was young, perhaps just a few years older than myself, with worn eyes that said she had seen too much. Do you have somewhere safe to stay tonight? She was wondering. The question had not even occurred to me. I have an apartment. Will your parents know how to find you? Of course they will. They'd arrive full of fury and blame. The concept made me feel sick. I can link you with resources, the advocate said, handing me a card. Counseling services and temporary housing. What you are going through is a sort of familial trauma. I received her card but knew I wasn't going to call. I handled it the same way I managed everything else, alone, silently, and without asking for aid that may not come. Detective Daniel Mercer discovered me about 4:45 a.m. He seemed fatigued, yet satisfied. Your sister confessed. The evidence was overwhelming. Traffic camera evidence, paint transfer on her car, and her own blood alcohol test taken tonight. Her tale kept shifting, but she finally acknowledged to everything. Relief surged through me so strongly that I felt dizzy. What will happen now? She will be properly charged. Given the seriousness of the offenses, DUI, hit and run, escaping the scene of an injury accident, she faces considerable prison time. Your testimony will be vital throughout the trial. I'll be there as promised, whatever you need. He looked at me for a moment. Your folks are still inside the building. If you wish to avoid them, we may take you out by the rear entrance. I examined this and then shook my head. I'll stroll out the front. I'm not hiding anymore. They waited in the lobby. Dad stood with his arms folded, his face like a thundercloud. Mom sat slumped on a plastic chair, appearing hollowed out, having aged a decade in one night. Scarlett was nowhere to be seen. She was most likely already processed and being jailed for arraignment. Dad's gaze fixed on me with a ferocity that would have horrified a younger me. You've destroyed this family. You destroyed it yourself, I responded, my voice cool and steady. When you decided one daughter was worth more than the other, I just refused to go along with it. Mom eventually glanced up, her voice a hoarse whisper. She's your sister. How could you do this to her? She is a drunk motorist who left someone to die on the street. How will you defend her? Were your parents? Mom's voice trembled after everything we had done for you. Like what? The inquiry came out harsher than I had hoped, fueled by years of hidden hatred. They fed me and offered me a room. That is the very minimum of parental obligation, not a debt I owe you. Dad moved closer, his voice lowering to a menacing whisper. If you walk out that door, you're dead to us. No longer relatives or support. You will have nothing. I smiled and I could see it upset him. It wasn't a cheerful grin, but one of deep and freeing truth. I already have nothing from you, I responded, staring him straight in the eye. At least now I'm free. I moved past them into the early morning darkness. The sky was just starting to brighten around the edges, that deep, bruised blue that precedes morning. My car was alone in the parking lot, and I drove home via vacant streets, feeling lighter than I have in years. The next weeks were a jumble of court hearings, paperwork, and increasingly furious communications from my parents. They recruited a lawyer who attempted to undermine my testimony, portraying me as a jealous, vengeful sister who had invented proof out of rage. The traffic camera evidence rendered that scenario implausible, but they still tried. Then Mrs. Evelyn Parker's family contacted the prosecutor's office to see if they might meet with me. I consented, frightened of confronting the lady whose life my sister had nearly taken. Mrs. Evelyn Parker was in a wheelchair when I met her. Her daughter, Natalie Parker, was gently wheeling her into the victim services office where we'd agreed to meet. She was smaller than I expected, with gray hair and trembling hands, yet her eyes were keen and compassionate. "You're Claire Bennett," she remarked, looking at my face. "You look like you haven't slept in weeks." "Neither do you," I said, then quickly regretted my bluntness. But she laughed, which sounded like rustling leaves. "I like honesty. Sit down, dear. Let's talk." We spent 2 hours together. She described the accident from her perspective. Crossing the street after her book club meeting, the unexpected impact, waking up in the hospital unable to move her legs, months of physical rehabilitation, financial ruin, and nightmares that still awakened her at 3:18 a.m. I kept saying, "I'm so sorry," as if I could somehow apologize for my sister's conduct. "You didn't do this," Mrs. Evelyn Parker stated firmly. "And according to the police, you're the only one in your family who tried to make it right. Your parents actually approached my daughter. Did you know that?" I felt my blood become cold. "What?" Natalie Parker took out her phone and showed me a stored voicemail. My father's distinct voice echoed around the little space. "Hello, Mrs. Evelyn Parker. This is Robert Ashford. I am phoning to negotiate a settlement. My daughter committed a terrible mistake, but she's young and has a long future ahead of her. I'm willing to pay big cash if you're willing to speak with the prosecution about lowering the charges." He attempted to purchase her silence. I should not have been astonished, but I still was. "I told him to go to hell," Natalie Parker stated simply. "Your sister nearly killed my mother and drove away. No amount of money changes that." Mrs. Evelyn Parker stretched over and clasped my hand with shaking fingers. "But you said the truth. In a family that plainly prioritizes image over integrity, you chose the correct thing. That requires a level of guts that most people never have to find." Her remarks stuck with me throughout the trial, through my sister's 5-year sentence, and through my parents' final cruel texts informing me I was no longer their daughter. Scarlett was convicted and sentenced to 5 years. Mom and Dad recruited the best lawyers money could buy, but the evidence was overwhelming. Traffic cameras, paint samples, and testimony from a jogger who witnessed the entire incident. My sister's blood alcohol level had nearly doubled the legal limit. I packed my studio apartment the day after the sentencing. My phone was continually ringing with calls from my parents, which I directed to voicemail. The messages became increasingly nasty as they realized I was not going to respond. The first one from Mom was nearly conciliatory. "Claire Bennett, we need to discuss this. You have made your point." By the 6th, her genuine sentiments had surfaced. "You ruined your sister's life out of spite. I knew you were envious of her, but I never imagined you'd be that cruel." Dad's messages centered on realism. "Scarlett's actions were wrong, but your tenacity has cost this family hundreds of thousands of dollars in court bills. Your sister's future is wrecked. I hope you can live with it." I could. I slept better than I have in years. I relocated to Portland, which is 3 states distant from my family in Ohio. I enrolled at community college using the money I had earned from working extra shifts at the grocery store. The plan had always existed, hidden behind years of their low expectations and my own resigned acquiescence. Now nothing could stop me. My academic supervisor, Dr. Allison Walsh, was the first person to see my potential. She became very interested in my placement tests as she studied them. "Have you ever considered majoring in computer science? These analytical results are extraordinary." I barely finished high school. I acknowledged that my family had always felt I was not college material. Dr. Walsh took off her spectacles and studied me with keen brown eyes. "Your family was mistaken. I have been doing this for 28 years. You have aptitude." Those words altered everything. I plunged myself into my studies with feverish concentration. Programming languages made more sense to me than anything else. There were laws, logic, and issues with obvious answers. Work yielded results. Effort matters. The first semester was terrible. I had been out of school for 11 years, and my study abilities were almost non-existent. Everything my peers appeared to know immediately, such as how to take notes, prepare for examinations, and handle several deadlines, I had to learn by trial and error. I failed my first programming midterm. After that, I sat in my car and grieved for 25 minutes, believing that my parents were correct all along. Then I wiped my eyes, went to Dr. Walsh's office hours, and requested assistance. She did not sugarcoat it. "You've fallen behind. Your basics are weak. But you're also one of the most driven pupils I've met. Determination can accomplish a lot." She linked me with a tutor, a doctoral student called Kevin O'Connor, who was infinitely patient with my foolish queries. We gathered 4 times a week in the library to go through difficulties until the principles resonated. Slowly and gradually, I began to realize. I earned an A/B on my 3rd midterm. I received an A on my final test. Kevin O'Connor gave me a high five after the grades were released. "Do you know what the difference was?" he said with shining eyes. "You overcame your fear of making mistakes. You simply continued trying till you had it right." His observation cut harder than he realized. I'd spent my whole life terrified of being incorrect, because being wrong meant proving my parents correct about me. But in this new world I was creating, being incorrect just meant I hadn't learnt anything yet. There was no guilt in it, only opportunity. The next semester I took 6 classes and worked 28 hours a week at a tiny computer firm to pay my bills. Sleep became an unaffordable luxury. I lived on instant ramen and coffee, studying in my spare time between work and school. Marcus Grant, the owner, recognized my devotion. He had begun the firm in his garage 6 years ago, and grew it with pure, stubborn persistence, a road I recognized in myself. "You're going to burn out if you keep this pace," he cautioned me one evening, when he discovered me debugging code at 1:10 a.m. "I can't afford to slow down," I explained simply. "I'm making up for lost time." "Lost time from what?" I said, offering a truncated version of my narrative. The family that had abandoned me, my sister in prison, and the decision that had cost me everything while also giving me everything. Marcus listened without interrupting, his gaze becoming contemplative. After I finished, he sat back in his chair and nodded once. "My parents wanted me to become a doctor," he explained. "Traditional, prestigious, and honorable. I dropped out of medical school to write code in my garage. They did not talk with me for 3 years. Did they finally come around? Eventually, but by then, I had realized I no longer needed their approval." He waved around the workplace of the firm he'd founded. "This is mine. They can accept or reject it. Regardless, it exists." That exchange changed how I saw my own journey. I'd been fleeing from my family's judgment, attempting to prove them wrong. Marcus demonstrated an alternative possibility, creating something so genuine that their opinions became meaningless. Within a year, I had transferred to Portland State University on a full scholarship. I kept working part-time at Marcus's software business, analyzing code and learning everything I could. "You're wasting your time doing grunt work," he informed me after I solved an issue that had puzzled their top developers for many weeks. "I'm moving you to the development team." The development team was made up of 7 persons, all of whom had computer science degrees from prominent colleges. I was the only community college transfer, and the only one who began coding after turning 26. The lone lady. Brandon Cole, my new boss, expressed his doubt early on. "Marcus loves to offer individuals opportunities," he told me after my first team meeting. "But this is professional grade work. If you can't keep up, speak out before bringing down the entire squad." I kept my lips shut and head down, allowing my job to speak for itself. When Brandon Cole gave me what he plainly felt was a tedious duty of documenting historical code that no one wanted to modify, I discovered 3 serious security flaws concealed in the ancient routines. Marcus summoned an emergency meeting after I submitted my report. If the weaknesses had been exploited by the wrong persons, the firm may have suffered catastrophic consequences. I not only discovered them, but also provided elegant solutions that would fill the gaps without disrupting existing functionality. Brandon Cole's expression as Marcus complimented my work in front of the entire business was almost worth the restless hours I'd spent searching over the code. "Good catch," Brandon Cole mumbled, unable to meet my gaze. "Just doing my job," I said evenly. But something had altered. The other developers began approaching me with questions, seeking my feedback on design decisions, and incorporating me in informal talks around the coffee machine. I was becoming a member of the team, gaining respect one challenge at a time. My social life, such as it was, consisted primarily of study groups and coworkers. I'd learned to be alone in my family, and that skill translated nicely into my newfound freedom. But there was a distinction between voluntary solitude and forced seclusion. Maya Collins, from my database management class, asked me to a party at her residence. I nearly declined. Parties were never my thing, but something made me accept. The meeting was tiny, about 14 persons, primarily computer science students. They discussed code and theory, and fought politely about the finest programming languages. For the first time in my life, I was in a room where I understood the topic and could make a significant contribution. You are the one who discovered those security flaws at Chen's firm, correct? I asked a man called Jordan Pierce. I learned about it through the internship network. Quite amazing. People were discussing my work. I was impressed with something I had done. The novelty of it made me nearly ecstatic. I began accepting more invites: coffee with Maya Collins, lunch with Kevin O'Connor, and happy hour with the development team. Building a social network from scratch was difficult and uncomfortable, but it was also mine, based on who I truly was, rather than who I was expected to be. My neighbor, Helen Gallagher, became an unexpected friend. She reminded me of what a mother could be: engaged, supporting, critical when needed, and always kind. She showed me how to prepare actual cuisine, not just ramen and pre-made meals. "You're too thin," she said, arriving at my home one Saturday with bags of food. "Come on, I'm showing you how to prepare lasagna." Her kitchen was warm and messy, the result of a long life. Photographs of children and grandkids adorned the refrigerator. Plants grew on every windowsill. She strolled around the area with ease, picking out pans and supplies and explaining each process. "Cooking is chemistry," she explained. "You understand coding. You can comprehend this." She was correct. Following a recipe was similar to following an algorithm: exact quantities, defined stages, and predictable results. I approached learning with the same zeal that I did everything else. While we waited for the lasagna to bake, Helen Gallagher commented that her granddaughter had gone to college to study computer technology. "She's doing quite well, works at a large firm in Silicon Valley. Are you close to her?" Helen Gallagher's countenance flashed with sadness. "Not as close as I would want. She's busy. I am elderly. That's life." "You are not old," I gently reminded her. "You are training me to prepare lasagna." She giggled and rubbed my hand. "Claire Bennett, you're fantastic for my ego. I'm delighted you moved next door." The statement struck a raw nerve in me. Someone was relieved I existed in their space. It was such a simple thing, yet I had never experienced it before. The lasagna came out nicely. Helen Gallagher sent me home with half of it and promised to make bread from scratch the next week. My parents phoned a couple times that first year. I changed my phone number, yet they continued to seek for my new contact information. I never responded, allowing their increasingly irate voicemails to pile up before deleting them in batches. Then, around 16 months after I went to Portland, Mom caught me in a moment of weakness. I had recently completed a difficult exam and was not paying attention when I answered an unfamiliar number. Her voice on the other end was strained with rage. "Scarlett writes to us about how bad jail is. She cries every day. She's experiencing panic attacks. The other convicts are abusive to her. And you continue to live your life as if nothing had occurred. She hit someone with her car and left them to die on the street." I answered gently, my voice cold and professional. "Mrs. Evelyn Parker spent 3 months in the hospital. She still cannot walk without assistance. Please tell me more about Scarlett's jail experience. You could have avoided all of this." Mom's voice crackled. "One modest sacrifice. That is all we requested. You wanted me to go to prison for a crime that I did not commit. You said I was trashy, unattractive, and useless in comparison to her. You wanted me to throw away my life because you believed hers was more valuable." My voice stayed firm and steadfast. "So I made a decision too. I picked myself. You are not the girl I raised. Good. Your daughter was miserable." I hung up and blocked the number. That was 3 years ago, and I have not communicated with them since. 2 months ago, I received a message on LinkedIn from James Callahan. The name seemed familiar, but I couldn't place it. Then I remembered Scarlett's fiancé, James, with whom she had purportedly planned a future. His message was brief. "I hope this gets to you. I know we have never met. I wanted you to know that I ended my engagement to your sister around 7 months after her conviction. Your parents informed her you'd been lying about what happened that night and had sabotaged her out of envy. I want you to know that I never believed them. I contacted Mrs. Evelyn Parker's family and learned the facts. I apologize for everything you went through. You did the correct thing." I gazed at the message for a long time. The vindication felt remote, like if it happened to someone else. I'd stopped seeking their approval years before, but I reacted nevertheless. "Thank you for contacting out. I hope you are well." His reply arrived an hour later. "I married somebody else 2 years ago. She is a public defender. Works with humans. The system fails. Meeting her helped me understand why you took that decision. Some things are more important than familial loyalty." I grinned at that. A stranger's husband understood me more than my own parents ever did. The years in Portland changed me in ways that I'm still finding. After struggling through community college, I transferred to Portland State and graduated summa cum laude with a degree in computer science. The lady who had just from high school finished university with a 3.8 GPA of 3.8 and employment offers from 3 separate firms. I decided to stay with Marcus Grant. Loyalty was important to me, and he gave me a chance when I was nobody. 2 years after graduation, I was promoted to lead developer at Marcus's firm, which had evolved from a scrappy startup to a real contender in the cybersecurity industry. My income had already reached 6 digits. I bought a tiny house in a quiet area with a garden that I was learning to tend. Tomatoes were supposedly more difficult to cultivate than code. My neighbor, Helen Gallagher, a retired teacher, handed me flower garden cuttings and told me about composting. She knew nothing about my family, Scarlett, jail, or the decision I had taken. To her, I was simply Claire Bennett, the quiet young woman next door who occasionally needed help identifying weeds. "You have good instincts," she told me one Saturday morning while we worked in my garden. "This soil was completely depleted when you bought the place. Look at it now." I examined the dark, rich dirt streaming between my fingertips. Something that had died was brought back to life via careful work. The metaphor was not lost on me. Scarlett was freed on parole last week. She had completed 4 years of her 5-year term with credit for good behavior. I knew because she had somehow discovered my email address and sent me a message. The subject line said, "We need to talk." The email itself was lengthy and meandering, alternating between fury and self-pity. She had lost her invitation to graduate school. James had abandoned her. She had a criminal record, making work practically difficult. Our parents had spent their retirement funds on legal expenses and appeals. And somehow, it was all my fault. "You ruined my life because you were jealous," she wrote. "You constantly resented the fact that I was prettier, smarter, and more accomplished. You saw one opportunity to tear me down and grabbed it. I made an error. People make errors, but you had a choice. You decided to be nasty." I read it 3 times, waiting for an emotion to develop. Anger, guilt, satisfaction, or anything. But there remained only a faint recollection of who she had always been, and who I had ultimately ceased being. I carefully wrote my response. "Scarlett, you were driving intoxicated. You struck a 66-year-old woman in the crosswalk and drove away as she lay bleeding on the pavement. Mrs. Evelyn Parker survived, but she will never fully recover. She had to relearn how to walk. She is still in chronic pain, and her medical bills have bankrupted her family's savings. Our parents asked me to go to prison for your crime, telling me that I was worthless, ugly, and that my life was less important than yours. They asked me to give up my freedom so you could keep your opportunities, but I refused. That is the extent of my crime against you. You believe you deserve special treatment because your parents spent your entire life telling you that you were exceptional, but you're not. You're just someone who made a bad decision and had to pay for it. I sincerely hope you rebuild your life, but you'll have to do it the same way I did mine, through hard work, accountability, and the understanding that no one owes you anything just because you want it. I will not answer to any future emails. I wish you the best, but I am no longer a part of your life." I emailed it and then quickly banned her email address. Then I disabled my parents' emails, cutting off the final thread that connected us. The relief was profound. 3 days ago I received a letter in certified mail. Although there was no return address, the postmark indicated that it came from Ohio. Inside was a handwritten message from my father. "Claire Bennett, your mother is quite unwell. The doctors think she does not have much time left. She is begging for you. Whatever your complaints are with this family, she is still your mother. She reared you, nourished you, and provided you with a home. You owe her at least one visit. Put aside your pride, and do the right thing. Dad." I held the letter for a long time, sitting on my porch swing as the dusk light faded over my garden. Helen Gallagher was watering her flowers next door, singing something tuneless but happy. The dying woman was not my mother in any manner that counted. She ceased being that the minute she looked at me coldly and decided I was disposable. Our biological tie was only a genetic fluke, no more substantial than having a blood type with a stranger. I considered the mother I wished to have. The one who would have safeguarded both of her children, who would have had Scarlett face her penalties while still giving love and support, and who saw value in both of us. That mother had not existed. I had finally accepted the reality. I walked inside and wrote a quick answer. "Dad, I hope Mom receives the care she requires. I will not be visiting. Claire Bennett. I sent it the next morning. 4 weeks later, another certified letter arrived. I knew exactly what it would say before I opened it. The funeral notification was simple and conventional. My mother passed away. Services would be conducted in the church where I was christened as an infant, which I hadn't visited in almost a decade. I was recorded as a survivor, as if I had been present in her life. I placed the notification into the recycling bin and went to work. Yesterday, Marcus Grant summoned me to his office. I was working on a significant security contract that had the potential to propel the organization to new heights. My work was precise, identifying difficulties before they arose and fixing them with beautiful efficiency. Marcus Grant smiled as he continued. The client was impressed. They want you to lead the implementation team. It's a promotion, a large raise, and your own department. We spoke about the specifics for an hour. This role would make me one of the company's youngest department heads. The salary was ludicrous, something I'd never considered applying to my life. I accepted on the moment. Walking back to my car, I contacted Dr. Allison Walsh. She'd become a friend over the years, and I checked in with her quarterly to report my progress and ask advice. I informed her I received the promotion. Her pleased giggle filled the phone. I knew you would. You have earned it 1,000 times over. She paused. I kept thinking about our first encounter in your office. When you told me I had aptitude. You did. You do. She continued, her voice becoming quieter. I've seen many pupils pass through my programs. Very few of them possess your brains and determination. But I have observed something. The people that accomplish the most are frequently those who have something to prove. You had more to prove than most. I don't anymore, I realized as I spoke it aloud for the first time. I'm not trying to prove them wrong anymore. I'm simply living. That's when you've truly won, Dr. Allison Walsh replied softly. We spoke for a little longer before saying goodbye. I drove home through Portland's nighttime traffic, seeing the city lights turn on against the darker sky. My phone was buzzing with texts from coworkers congratulating me. Plans for a celebratory supper were already underway. I thought of Scarlett in Ohio, freshly freed and presumably trying to find work because of her record, living with our father in the house where we grew up. Mom had passed away 4 weeks ago, and she was buried without my presence. I imagined Dad alone with the daughter he attempted to save and the one he'd discarded, and all I felt was a distant optimism that they'd ultimately come to terms with their decisions, just as I had. My house gleamed warmly as I pulled into the driveway. Helen Gallagher waved from her porch, saying something about bringing zucchini bread tomorrow. Inside, my home office was filled with proof of my actual life. Framed degrees, job awards, and photos of coworkers who had become friends. There are no family photographs. I stopped exhibiting them years ago. I prepared dinner and worked in my garden till the light went out entirely. The tomatoes were finally flourishing, laden with fruit that would mature in the following weeks. I'd learnt patience with them, seeing that progress could not be pushed, but rather encouraged and given time. My phone vibrated one last time. An email sent from an unknown address. I nearly deleted it before reading it, but something compelled me to open it. Miss Claire Bennett, my name is Natalie Parker. My mother was the victim of the hit and run that involved your sister. I wanted to reach out since my mother had requested me to contact you. She read about your sister's release in the press and wanted to tell you something. She wants you to know that she has forgiven your sister for what transpired. But more than that, she wanted me to tell you that your story, your honesty about what occurred that night, restored her trust in humans. She had been suffering with wrath and resentment, believing that justice did not exist. Learning that someone had chosen truth above familial loyalty, even at tremendous personal sacrifice, aided her recovery in ways that medicine could not. My mother is now 74. She is still in pain and needs a cane, but she is at peace with it. She wanted you to know that your choice was important to her and that it helped. Thank you for your integrity. Sincerely, Natalie Parker. I read it 3 times. Tears obscured the words and surprised me with their ferocity. I hadn't sobbed about anything in years, but these weren't tears of sorrow or rage. They represented something cleaner, almost like finality. I wrote back. Dear Natalie, please tell your mother that her note meant more than she knows. I hope she continues to heal. I hope she has many happy years ahead. Thank you for contacting out. With thanks, Claire Bennett. I submitted it and shut my laptop. The home was calm around me, full of the life I had created from nothing. There is no family legacy, no parental support, and no sister's shadow to live in. Just my own work, my own decisions, and my steadfast reluctance to accept their interpretation of who I was meant to be. I moved through my house, shutting out lights and closing doors in preparation for sleep. In my bedroom, I saw my reflection in the mirror. The face staring back was not awful. It had never been unattractive. It was all mine, lived in and earned, with challenges my family would never comprehend since they hadn't bothered to witness them. Tomorrow I'd go to work and begin establishing my new department. I'd hire people who shown promise in the same way Marcus Grant and Dr. Allison Walsh saw it in me. I'd make something worthwhile with nothing but labor and vision. My phone was now quiet. There are no more letters from Ohio. No more guilt trips or manipulations. My mother was killed and buried without my tears. My father had reclaimed Scarlett, the daughter he had chosen. They could rebuild any connection they wanted without my interfering. Helen Gallagher's zucchini bread might appear at some time. Work would be difficult and fulfilling. My garden would require maintenance. My existence would continue, constructed on my own foundations and nourished by the effort I decided to make. They wanted me to give up everything for Scarlett because they believed I was worth less. Instead, I walked away and realized how much I was worth when assessed by my own standards rather than theirs. The math worked out better than they could have dreamed. I got into bed and slept peacefully, dreamlessly, like someone who had finally let go of a burden she was never meant to bear. Tomorrow would bring new problems, new wins, and new proof that the person they'd discarded was precisely the person who ought to be retained. And that, I thought as I went off to sleep, was the finest justice of all. Call to action. I hope my tale touched some of you. It has been a long road, and it is still ongoing. I would love to hear your opinions. Have you ever had to choose yourself above your family's expectations, or leave a relationship that was holding you back? Tell me what you think in the comments section. I genuinely want to know.